that's where I really learned to put the things that I learned in class into practice. It's very different to read about pruning and then standing in front of the vine. The vines are gnarled and crazy, and you're trying to figure out which bud is the first bud that I count, and it's really interesting. But one of my favorite parts was I was like, well, Leon, what if I cut the wrong one? He's like, well, it'll grow back. And for me, just that moment of it's okay. You're not going to kill somebody. You're not going to kill the vine. And it was very freeing, just to be able to, and then you're outside in the sunshine and it's beautiful. And yeah. So I still didn't think that I was going to do this right away. It is not cheap to start a vineyard. I didn't really know where I wanted to be, but like I said, the more time I spent here, Leon and Cindy just took me into their family and really really supported me and all my nerdiness. And I think I'd had a bad week at work, and I said something to Leon about how I just wanted to get out and buy my own vineyard.
Welcome to the Transition Drill Podcast. I'm your host, Paul Pantiani. I appreciate you taking the time to watch. So let's get into this.
Do you have to lock the goats up, or they free roam?
They are locked up right now. They have we call it the goat palace. They have a little pen that they stay in during the day. And right now they can't really go out because we're getting so close to harvest. They'll eat all of the vine if I let the goats out. I've been letting the sheep out in the field for the last month just to see what they do. My sheep are tall enough that they can graze the leaves off over the fruit, but the fruit isn't sweet yet, so they're not as interested in it. So I've been letting them out during the day and then just put them back in their pen at night. So
I guess the thing for me is because you're using the sheep and the goat to avoid using herbicides and stuff, correct?
Yes.
Now you mentioned the sheep won't eat the fruit because the fruit's not sweet enough yet, but the goats will just tear through anything. How do you keep them eating only the weeds and not the...
I just can't let them out this time of year.
Oh, okay.
So as soon as we harvest, I put the goats back out, and then they essentially stay all winter out there. Right now what I'm doing, we just went through and we used a weed knife, which goes about 6 inches under the ground, and it actually cuts the roots off for the weeds. It's got a little hydraulic arm on it that prevents it from getting the vines. And then I go through and actually collect the weeds and take them to the goats. So, that part I'm still working out a better way. But with a cover crop, and then if I put a cover crop down, it competes with the weeds, so I can actually select what I want growing under the vines. And then I just got 2 more baby doll sheep. I have 2 lambs up there that I went and picked up on Wednesday. So I'm hoping because they're smaller that they can stay out longer in the season. So, but again, if I only have 2 or 4, right now it makes it harder because it's a lot of weeds for them to eat.
And will they compete with each other, so to speak? Or will you ever have the goats and the sheep together in the field?
Yes, we did that last winter. I can't put my ram out with the goats because he'll just chase them around. But I can put the female, and I'm hoping the new lambs. So yeah, last winter I had to kind of alternate who went out. But this fall I'm hoping that we'll be able to put everybody out except the ram. So
I'm going to try to help you out here.
Okay. No, I know. It's just...
That sun is going to keep creeping, and so I'm going to try something different. I'm going to keep talking to you while we move this umbrella.
Okay.
So, to keep the interview going...
Yes.
Tell me where you're from.
Absolutely. I grew up in Washington State, so west of Seattle, the Bremerton area. Most of my family is still up there right now. My grandpa worked for the...
Is that helping you?
Not yet.
Not yet.
If it was like right there, I think. But of course, I don't want it blocking the camera.
Oh, no. We will try to get it as close to you as we can.
Yeah, that'll do it right there. Is it still good?
And we're still good on an image shot.
Perfect. I'll just slide over here.
So for everybody getting to watch this, I just basically walked around the entire, we'll loosely call it a movie set.
There we go. Okay, I'll start over. So, yeah, I was born and raised in Bremerton, Washington, so just west of Seattle. My family is all still up there. My grandpa had worked for the Navy shipyard as a contractor, but they've been there for a long time. So yeah, I grew up there. I always said I wouldn't join the Navy because I grew up in a Navy town. I went to school, nursing school in a teeny tiny little town, Port Angeles, Washington. And then I wanted to travel as a nurse. So that is what my degree was in. But I didn't want to be a travel nurse. So that's when, this was 2004, 2005, the Navy was putting on some really, all of the military forces at that time were really increasing their healthcare personnel. So I called the Air Force and they...
So if I could stop you just real quick. So you went into college not with the intention of going in the military.
Correct.
It was when you got done with college that you started kind of looking at the military.
Yeah, I worked as a civilian nurse for a year in Everett, and that's where I was getting my bachelor's degree from University of Washington while I was doing that. And so I got my initial training as a nurse there, and that's when I met travel nurses. And yeah, the travel nurses were always the ones getting the worst assignments, and at the time, that was not what I thought I wanted to do.
Now, when you say a travel nurse, is that somebody who basically accompanies a patient on a commercial airliner or something to that effect?
No, but that's what I did want to do at one point in my life, but I never did. The travel nurses take short period assignments, and so they'll do 6 weeks here, 13 weeks there. But they go all over the country. And so we're seeing a lot of that now as nurses are getting burned out. They feel they have a little more control over their assignments. So I get folks through here all the time that are on travel assignments to California that they just want to experience something different and for a short period. You're not locking in with the hospital. You're working for your own company. So
the travel aspect is more of you're traveling to your work assignment.
Mm-hmm. Yes.
And there is the option of continual movement or moving around.
Yes. But I at the time I didn't want to do that. But I thought if I joined the Navy, I could travel, see the world, and still always be under one organization. So like I said, I tried calling around a couple places first, but then the Navy flew me to San Diego and took me on a tour of the hospital ship. And I was like,
sold?
Yeah, I could do this. So, so I signed up with the Navy in 2005. My first duty station was in San Diego. It was awesome.
Did you commission?
I did, yes.
So did you have to go to OCS?
I did.
And where's that at?
Newport, Rhode Island. So we did 5 weeks there. I think it was September. It was like the perfect time to be there because it wasn't too hot. It wasn't too cold. They call it fork and knife school, which I think is kind of a misnomer. But like they're teaching a bunch of professional adults what it's like to be in the Navy. So Navy history, Navy, some of the terms, because it's a whole nother language when you get in there.
And when you went in, were you thinking long term? Were you thinking career, or was it going to be let me evaluate as I go?
It was, I always said I would stay in until I had a reason to get out. And so, from San Diego, they sent me to Naples, Italy, which was amazing. That's part of the reason I'm here today. I did 3 years in Naples. At the time, we had a small hospital there. They've since turned it into a clinic. So I would have, I would do 3 12-hour shifts a weekend and then have a couple days off, which meant I got the next weekend off and we got to travel everywhere. So all over Europe, all over Italy. I had a great group of friends there. My landlords lived below me. I had a beautiful view. It was one of those, times in your life where you're like, pinch me. I can't believe the Navy is paying me to do this. So,
are you only treating Navy personnel, or when you say it's now a clinic, are you treating civilians also?
No, it's, so it's not just the Navy personnel, but it's their families. So their families get their care from us. And then we also supported NATO while we were there. So I actually have some friends that I'm still friends on Facebook today that are from Denmark, because they were there at the NATO headquarters in Naples at the time I was. So I met them through that. So.
And you ended up doing how many years total active duty?
Almost 14. So I think it was like 13 years, 8 months. So let's see. So After Naples, I went back to Virginia, and from there I deployed twice. So I deployed to Afghanistan in 2014, and then to Guantanamo Bay in 2015, and that was those ones were really hard. I went on antidepressants while I was in Guantanamo Bay. And when I came back, I basically told myself, okay, the Navy has 2 years to change my mind. Or like, I just can't do this anymore. And so when I got back, I really struggled with my mental health. I did seek out, like a psychiatrist that could help me, in the civilian community. I was trying to keep it out of off the Navy records just in case. And I just got to be where my command wasn't supporting me leaving early to go to my appointments out in town. So
did you keep it completely secret from everybody in your command?
No. I mean, my department head knew. And I actually, one of the things that I felt was really important was talking about it with with the people who were under me. Because, when I came back from Afghanistan, it took somebody else telling me that I needed to go get help versus, because you don't think about it, you don't realize it when you're in the middle of it. And, I think the military is attempting to do better at treating the sailor soldiers for mental health, but there's still a stigma attached that, people just don't want to do that or feel like it makes them weak to seek out help. So I actually tried to be as open about that as possible, because it meant a lot to me when somebody else had done that for me. It made me feel like it was okay to get help. So,
in hindsight, being kind of that voice of advice for somebody, when you came back, how was it manifesting itself that maybe you weren't seeing, that you said it took somebody else? Mm-hmm. What were you doing, or what was in your life that somebody else saw?
Yeah, that's a great question. For the most part, I was really struggling with getting out of bed. I was in a leadership position, and so I didn't have set hours. I mean, we do 60 hours a week pretty easily. But I would just, getting out of bed in the morning, I'm really struggling with that. And then what I didn't see was kind of the bluntness. I wasn't smiling, happy self anymore. And I think that started, like, I found myself getting more frustrated more easily. And that's when one of my coworkers, she started talking about how when she came back from Afghanistan 2 years before, that, she's like, oh yeah, we're all on meds. Everybody's on meds. It's okay. Like, everybody needs to talk it out. And I was like, oh, I didn't think it had affected me that much. I actually had a very positive experience in Afghanistan, if that's what you can call it. But it still affects you in a way that most people don't realize. And it's hard to talk about it with people who've never been there. So I think it was having somebody kind of reach backwards and pull me into that I felt was important to do that to others. So.
How are you doing today with it all? Or is it better for you?
Yeah, I'm actually, I just onboarded with the VA. So I had kind of put off doing that until I got settled in the reserves. And but I got my VA disability. I started transferring all my care over to them in January of this year. And they asked if I wanted a mental health referral. And I was like, maybe I should. It is a lot better. I love what I'm doing every day, which helps a lot. But there are still some days that are harder than others. When I have to put my uniform on and go into work, there's, a little bit of dread with that now, which again is really unfortunate. That's why I left active duty, because I didn't want to be that person that dreaded putting on the uniform. And
you transitioned out of active duty to reserve status, and how much longer you've got for your reserve status do you see? I'm at 17 years this year. So if I get 3 more good years, then that should be enough to put me to retirement. But there are some days that it's harder than others to keep that up. I regret nothing about what I did in the Navy. I love being a part of that, but my heart is here now on the vineyard, and it just gets harder and harder to leave or go do something else. Well, for those not watching this, the view is absolutely horrible.
Yes.
It's definitely something that I could see you just getting up and going, I want to leave this right now.
It is. It's, I absolutely love it here. Because it's not just the view and being able to walk among the vines and, make wine, and it's, the community here is really amazing. And so, this is where I feel at home. And so it is, it gets hard to leave that and, go to Lemoore for the day and hang out there. So let's venture then into your wine life. Mm-hmm. You talked about being in Italy. Was that your first exposure to wine, or were you into wine before that? No, it was actually, I did not. I was probably 25, 26. I didn't drink wine before I got my orders. My roommate at the time in San Diego, she's like, you better start drinking wine because you're going to Italy. And so we started with the sangria and the barefoot, just like everybody does. And then of course I get to Italy and I loved it. And it wasn't just the wine itself. It was going to the family vineyards, and they take you around and show you things, and then you go back to the house and the nonna cooks you a meal, and it's such a neat way of how it brings everybody together. So that was, for me, that was my favorite part about the wine. Plus, just all the science. Again, I'm a nurse, and there's actually a lot of similarities, I think, between what we do in healthcare medicine, taking care of patients, and what we do for wine. The pH balances and, nutrition, all that stuff, it's actually very similar. And so I was the one asking all the nerdy questions at the vineyard, well, you say this, but why? And so, but yeah, that's where I got really interested in the... Were you asking those questions because you could already see that maybe this was where you were going, or literally just the nerd side of you wanted to know the science of it? Yes. And then the more I learned, the more interesting I found it. And so, my landlord was making wine in his garden shed basement, and that's what we had on the Sunday, family meals. And it was just such an amazing experience. So I always said, well, someday I'll buy a vineyard, thinking it would be more of like a retirement type thing. After that, I spent most of my deployments reading about wine. So I would buy books about winemaking, grape growing, other people's experience with wine. And then in Virginia, there was a wine bar near us, and they would do classes. And so I started taking classes there. And the more, like I said, the more I got into it, the more interesting I found it. And so I just kept digging further. Was there a single event or a single moment when you realized, okay, the whole idea of buying a vineyard is going to become a reality? When did that switch happen? And you're like, I want to own a vineyard. So when I got back to California, when I was talking with the therapist, and should we have them put that away?
The kids are out.
The kids are out.
It's a real interview. This is a working vineyard.
Good morning. So when I got back to California, I sought out a therapist to kind of help me talk through things. And I had mentioned, I was taking classes at the San Diego State University. They have a business of wine program. And I had mentioned how much I just really wanted to, do something with wine instead of what I was doing. And my therapist suggested, well, maybe you should go volunteer at a vineyard and make sure that's really what you want to do, or see, if that's. I was like, oh, that's a good idea. So I came up here for a Warriors Helping Warrior event over at Tackitt Family Vineyards. And Leon Tackitt actually served in the Navy with my uncle. And so my aunt had introduced us. I came up for the event, and then the next morning, I offered to Leon. Well, I asked Leon if I could come help sometime, and he's like, "Yep, there's an event next month. You can be here then." And so I just started coming up from Oceanside, making the trip up here as much as I could. And every time I came up, I didn't want to go back. So that's where I really learned to put the things that I learned in class into practice. It's very different to read about pruning and then standing in front of the vine. The vines are gnarled and crazy, and you're trying to figure out which bud is the first bud that I count. And it's really interesting. But one of my favorite parts was, I was like, well, Leon, what if I cut the wrong one? He's like, yeah, it'll grow back. And for me, just that moment of it's okay. You're not going to kill somebody. You're not going to kill the vine. And it was very freeing, just to be able to, and then you're outside in the sunshine and it's beautiful. And yeah. So I still didn't think that I was going to do this right away. It is not cheap to start a vineyard. I didn't really know where I wanted to be, but like I said, the more time I spent here, Leon and Cindy just took me into their family and really supported me and all my nerdiness. And I think I'd had a bad week at work, and I said something to Leon about how I just wanted to get out and buy my own vineyard. And he's like, well, I think Joyce and Wally are selling. So the previous owners of this vineyard had done this as a retirement project. And then Wally turned 80 and they decided they wanted a real retirement. So they had kind of mentioned it to some of the other winery owners here in the area. And so, the next day Leon drove me up. They poured me Petit Verdot at sunset right here with this view. And I was like,
you're sold.
I'm sold. Yeah. I did go back and drink a lot of wine with my roommate. Like, can I really do this? Can I really get out of the Navy at this point? Once I started exploring it as an option, everything just started falling into place. And it just, I do not regret it for a second. So,
how many different areas when you started? I know you were coming up here helping, but did you go exploring any other winemaking regions before you settled here?
I had done some before. I'm from Washington State, but from the west side. I'd made a couple trips up to Walla Walla, which is another really fun wine area. It actually reminds me a lot of here. It's kind of farm country turned wine country. And I thought about maybe doing something there someday, but it's a little too wet and cold on the west side right now to grow very many grapes. There are some people doing it. I know it can be done, but it's just a little more challenging. Give us 20 years, and I think it'll be warm enough there that we'll be growing grapes in Bremerton.
No, don't fuel the I don't want to call them conspiracy theorists about the whole global warming.
Oh, it is definitely heating up. So, but we, so I had done a little bit there. I had a friend in Oregon that lived next to a vineyard, and so I had met with them and chatted about their region and what challenges they saw. Of course, they're growing mostly Pinot and like cool weather grapes there. But what it came down to is here I have, I have Leon and Cindy. And then I have all their contacts. And Leon always says that, he had so many people that helped him out in the early days. And I mean, really, like we all still need help. That he was willing to help me through my early days, which he's still doing. I can still bug him with questions when I run into something that I haven't experienced before. He was able to connect me with other professionals that could come out and give me some advice on what was going on in my vineyard. So having that community is what really drew me here, is that here everyone was so willing to help each other out, and having that was really important to me.
Was there a particular grape that was in your mind as like, this is what I want to grow?
So it's interesting you say that. So I did buy the vineyard with fruit already, or vines already on it. But I'd never had Petit Verdot as a single varietal until I'd had Leon's, and I loved it. That was one of my favorite varietals that I would come up, and that's what I would seek out here in Paso. It's a Bordeaux blending grape, so it's not very commonly seen as a single varietal. And, but we happen to grow that on this property. And so I think that might have helped sway me a little bit too, is that I happen to love Petit Verdot.
Was that all they were growing here at the time?
No, we have Malbec, Petit Verdot, and then like 4 rows of Cabernet Franc. So, the traditional Bordeaux varietals are Cabernet Sauvignon, Merlot. Everyone's growing those, and then we grow the other 3. So it's kind of nice. I do sell some of my fruit. Actually, Leon buys some of my Malbec and Petit Verdot. I've been selling it to some other small wineries in the area too. I'm trying to keep more and more for myself. I'm making a Malbec rosé. I started making a port in 2020. So, that's what that's what I'm looking at, is just like doing what I grow, or doing the wines that I grow and do them really well. So when you were in Europe, did you find that, so you were stationed in Italy, mm-hmm. Did you spend most of your time just in Italy, or did you make it into some of the other growing regions like France? And how did you find the differences in those wines? Yes, So I did, learn to drink wine essentially on new or old world wines. So Italian wines, French wines. We did a lot of traveling. I wish that I had done, if I was there now, I would do it very differently. I did not go to Bordeaux at the time. We went skiing in Morzine, France, and drank a lot of wine there. But, I didn't go exploring the wine areas outside of us very, very much. I was still pretty new, and I didn't know what I didn't know. But we did do a tour around the Chianti region. I had a friend whose wife was Italian, and so we were able to do this like whole driving tour around Chianti, and it was just amazing. It was a lot of fun. And then I did some exploring around our area as well. So we had some small vineyard wineries that were out near Vesuvius with the volcanic soils, and so I had done a few tours out there too.
For somebody getting into wine, you mentioned previously that your landlord made wine in
mm-hmm.
in his garden basement, or whatever
yes.
you want to refer to it as. With wine being more kind of, I'll equate it to like beer in America.
Mm-hmm.
It's just inbred in their culture.
Mm-hmm.
Is it easier to step into wine in Europe, or do you find it more pretentious?
I wouldn't call it pretentious. I mean, some of the best wines that you can get over there are the table wines that they just put on the table in a carafe. It doesn't come in a bottle. If you tried to bottle it, it probably wouldn't keep or taste as well. So, I think it is a lot more approachable there. And it's also because, it is a way of their life. So they have wine with lunch, and they'll close down for an hour. I read somewhere the other day that the French are actually mandated an hour for their lunch break. And they'll have a glass of wine at lunch. And I feel like America, we don't embrace that. We don't accept that. And so, I mean, obviously I couldn't have wine with lunch because I was a nurse, and that's not okay. But, you know.
Well, you could. The patients might have an issue with it.
But yeah, so I do think it was kind of easier to get into like the ground level of wine. Now, of course, you go to France, and then they don't necessarily, they look down on, their wine is the best, right? So they look down on Italian wines, or they look down on California wines. And so I think there is still some level of that. So I think it just really depends on where you go. You know, if you're going to a small family vineyard, it's just like here in America, they're going to probably be a little more approachable than going to a very fancy chateau. So.
And when you decided to start your winery here, and we've already talked about you're using goats and sheep to avoid herbicides, are you looking to be an organic winery, or is that a completely different layer of operations?
It is. There's actually a lot of terms being thrown around right now: organic, sustainable, regenerative, biodynamic. You know, we've got all of those options out there. The other one is conventional, and so that's, you know, using the herbicides, the fungicides, all that in the vineyard. Organic kind of makes it so that you're only using organic materials. It's not necessarily sustainable. So you can spray copper in the field as a fungicide to prevent mildew, but the copper builds up in the soil. And so for me, I wanted something that was a little more, like I said, sustainable. I want to keep this vineyard as healthy as I can for as long as I can. So we did get our sustainability and practice certification last year. So there's a list of, do not use like chemicals that you can't use in the vineyard. And then they essentially give you points for all the other things you're doing. So the more renewable energy, the keeping track of, your tractor passes. But what that did, doing that certification, just made me keep really good records. So I was doing a lot of those practices anyway, but having to document it. So document when I mow, document when I shoot thin or leaf thin. And so yeah, it did take me a little while to get that just everything documented.
But you were already documenting more for the benefit of just your personal records of your winery?
Well, no, I should have been.
Oh.
But I didn't, just like anything else, it's so much easier if you keep records, but without a reason to do it. Sometimes people don't do it, right? I mean, you might have a binder that you keep all your car oil changing things in, but like it makes life so much easier when you can look back and see, oh yeah, I did that then, I did this then. And no, I was not doing that. I was so overwhelmed with everything going on that the thought of like sitting down and actually documenting everything. So it's actually been a good thing for me to kind of be forced to do that, because it does make everything a lot easier. I mean, I record fruit data and my lab samples and my winemaking stuff, but it was all the other things beyond that I wasn't tracking as well.
And so how many years are you into it now?
This will be my 5th harvest. So
do you, odd way, do you feel comfortable yet, or do you still feel like you're way behind the curve?
So I am definitely feeling a lot more comfortable. The first year that I was here, I just, it's like drinking from a fire hose. There was so much. I've read a lot of books. I'd helped Leon. I'd done all this stuff, but until I'm out in the field and I realized somebody had hit a valve and the valve was laying out in the middle of the field, I'm like, oh, I guess I'm learning PVC pipe repair today. So, there was just a lot. Now I'm very comfortable with PVC pipe repair. I can look at the vines and, I kind of feel like I've established a better relationship with them. So I can see when they're struggling or if there's something going on that I'm worried about. It's definitely easier, but I'm still, the heat this year, we're like 2 weeks early then we're 2 weeks ahead of our milestones from last year. And last year we were picking on September 2nd, which means this year, if we don't cool down a little bit, we might be picking in August, which is just really hot. And it's really interesting to see that. So yeah, we'll see kind of how the growing season goes. It's farming. There's only so much I can control. And so the rest of it is, reacting to what the vineyard does, what the weather does.
Projecting out, you potentially will be picking 2 to 3 weeks early. Will that also impact total production, like what you're actually able to pull from the vines?
It shouldn't. The vines are actually they're very healthy and happy this year. We had a really low production in the Malbec last year. And then I was talking to another farmer and they said their production is down this year. So all the varietals ripen at different times. So my Malbec flowers usually earlier than my Petit Verdot. And I think what happened last year is we had really strong winds in the spring, and we must have had that during the Malbec flowering. And that when the grapes flower, or the vines, they have these little blossoms and they're very fragile. And so if they get blown off, or we get hail or a freeze, it'll shatter the whole cluster, and so you just won't get much fruit. So I think that's what happened to my Malbec last year. This year it didn't. There's a lot of fruit on the vine. I've actually gone through and shoot thinned and actually removed some of the fruit. So. And
you're farming how many acres?
It's 7 acres of vines. So.
And do you have plans to add any other varietals, or are you going to stay with what you have right now?
I would love to plant some Aglianico, which is the red grape that I drank while I was in Italy. It was in the area where the Campania region, near Naples. That was most of the red table wines that we had were Aglianico, and that was one of my favorite wines from there. I've been talking to some folks about planting it here, and everyone says it's a really difficult grape to grow, and it's really challenging to make wine from it. So it might just be where I plant a couple vines and see what happens and go from there.
Is the region here significantly different than the Campania region, or are they about the same? They're about
the same, which is why, I would think that it would do well here. But even here in Paso, we have such different pockets. We're in the eastern side of Paso Robles, where it's a little hotter and a little drier than the west side. So even though we're only 12 miles away, they can grow Pinot on the west side, which is typically, again, a cooler weather vine. But out here, we can grow some of the hotter varietals.
So how did you come up with the name for your winery? And was it a lengthy process, multiple options, or did you know right away what it was going to be? So
I actually bought the winery with this name in place, but I felt it was so appropriate that I didn't want to change it. So it's Bon Niche, and loosely translates from French into a very good place. And I feel like that has really, it really does embody what is here. It is a very good place. Now trying to come up with my business names, that was a hard one. So I did, again, I love the farming. I love the winemaking, the view, all that stuff, but it's still at the end of the day a business, and I have to file reports. And, so I created an LLC and an S Corp to manage kind of the business sides of things. And those, I used our family name and just made it Frenchy. So, yeah.
The very technical. Yes. I made it Frenchy. Do you see yourself being able to grow this big enough to where you can step away a little bit, or do you not want to step away at all?
I would like to grow a little bit. And I would love to grow just enough where, yes, I can pay somebody to do my compliance reports and the administrative side. That's the part that I don't love doing. and that would give me more time to spend in the field or here on the patio with wine. So yeah, I do not plan on being, huge. I will probably never have a wine in Costco, but it would be nice to have somebody else that can handle some of the things I don't enjoy doing. So I'm not doing this to make millions of dollars. You generally don't in the wine business. But I'm doing it because I love it. And yeah, I would be sad if I had somebody doing everything for me and couldn't do this every day.
You do a cool thing where you take customers, friends, families, pictures, and make them your wine labels. Where did that idea come from?
That was also from the previous owner. I wish I thought of it. It's but we do it every year. We have themes for our wines, and we have folks send in their photos that fit those themes, and then I get to pick my favorite one every year, and that's always fun.
Do you find that the same people want to submit a photo every year and kind of almost you built a relationship with them?
Yes. And, even one of my neighbors this last year, she said she had sent in photos a long time ago, and I was like, well, I must not have seen those. And we were really struggling with our Manor photo, which is our Cabernet Sauvignon. And so I just had her bring her iPad over, and I went through her photos, and I was like, okay, I want you to send me this one and this one. And then, so she actually did get her photo submitted this year. But yes, there are some people that submit every year. I had one in 2020. He sent me like 50 photos. It was very impressive. I think we did select one of his photos, which is good because the amount of effort, that he went through to do that for us was also really, really cool.
First, now's when you get to put your advice hat on. Mm-hmm. For somebody looking to, like you said, I'd love to have a winery one day. Somebody's out there thinking about buying a winery. Mm-hmm. What big pieces of advice would you give them?
I would definitely make sure that you have a mentor. So finding somebody that's doing it already, and same thing, even if you're working for them for free, you learn so much doing that you can't get from a book or a class. So again, like how to hook up a pump. I'd never done that before. We didn't do that in class. I understood the theory, but actually putting it together is a whole nother thing. I can't tell you how many times Leon had to redo my work because I was just like, I still
just move out of the way. Let me do it.
But he's, so I definitely say, even if you're just volunteering at harvest, at a vineyard, we all need help during harvest, and everyone is usually willing to let you help. And I would say definitely do that just to see what it really is all about. It's not as romantic as, the movies make it seem. So there is a lot of hard work. There's getting up and, fixing a water leak, in the middle of the night or first thing in the morning or midnight, whenever it happens. So, and then the other thing is that I would definitely take some sort of business class. So whether that's, the Institute for Military and Veteran Families actually has some really amazing programs online. Your local Small Business Administration, a lot of those have resources for folks that want to do that. And I wish I had done those sooner. Again, the winemaking, the grape growing, that is the really fun part for me. But trying to figure out QuickBooks, how to invoice people, all of that was just not something in my wheelhouse. So
you mentioned taking classes to be a winery or a wine grower. Are there classes that either the state or the Wine Growers Association or anything require you to do on a regular basis?
No. I mean, you could go out and just plant some grapes and make some wine. Now, if you're making enough wine, then you do have to get licenses. I'm licensed through the TTB and the ABC, which is the alcohol beverage for California. So there's a lot of layers, which again, some of them I'm still trying to figure out, almost 5 years later now. And it's that part is pretty challenging too. But as far as like winemaking classes, there are a lot of programs, colleges. Like I said, San Diego State had a business of wine program, and it was an extension study. So, they offered classes on weekends and evenings for the people who worked, during the week. There's also online classes, UC Davis. I actually use my GI Bill, and I've taken a few classes at the UC Davis. They have their winemaking program. And then community colleges, a lot of those offer classes too. So there's a lot of options out there. And not all of them require you to go to a class. You can take them kind of on your own. But yeah, and I think that's what everybody wants to take, right? Those are the fun classes because you get to talk about wine and drink wine. But like I said, the business side is the if you're going to be in a business by a small business owner, it's really helpful to have that background.
It almost seems like that aspect of it is you're balancing that negative, and you've got to find all the positive in being a winery owner. Yes,
absolutely. I mean, don't get me wrong. Like I said, I love it. I love the farming. I love getting up in the morning and going out in the vineyard. I love harvest. Like harvest is such an exciting time of year because we're making wine. And yeah, that's, that part is really fun. But then, yeah, at some point I have to sit down with and reconcile my QuickBooks for the month. And yeah, that's
be a business owner.
Be a business owner. Yes. A lot of hats. Yeah.
If anybody should have questions for you, can they reach out?
Absolutely. Yes.
What's the best way to get a hold of you?
My website has all my contact information. So it's bonniche.com. So BONNICHE. I'm also on Instagram and Facebook. I don't do much with my personal stuff anymore because of the business. But you can reach out to me on either of those platforms, and I'm on those all the time.
And I'll put all of those in the show notes.
Perfect. Yes.
I appreciate your time.
Of course. Thank you so much. I'm really glad to get to do this.
I appreciate you watching. But before you go, if you like the video, please hit that subscribe button. Also, any comments are appreciated. Thank you.